a lot of heat coming from America towards Benjamin Netanyahu, with Chuck Schumer basically implying that he should be replaced as leader in a new election as soon as possible. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's unprecedented. I think people need to understand what a giant deal this is. The leadership of either party, Democrats or Republicans, have never, ever broken with Israel. Chuck Schumer is one of the biggest supporters of Israel in the whole country. For him to come out and say enough is enough, you've got to turn around, you've got to call new elections, and Netanyahu is damaging Israel is an enormous moment in American-Israeli relations. And he's not alone. Thomas Friedman, also an enormous Israeli supporter, wrote an article in the New York Times saying that Israel is now radioactive. And so these are not enemies of Israel. And the same goes for me. Allies of Israel saying, please turn around, because this is not good for, look, I care deeply about the Palestinians. I'm not sure that the Schumers of the world or the Bidens of the world have ever shown that. But all of us care about Israel as well. And this is catastrophic for Israel's reputation. And you do not want Israel to be alone in the world again. 21,000 women and children have been slaughtered at a minimum. Now 1.1 million Palestinians are starving as we speak now. You must turn around. Otherwise, this is horrific, not just for those starving, innocent human beings, but also for Israel itself.
Rabbi Shmuley, I mean, you've been obviously extremely passionate in your support of what Israel's been doing in response to that terror attack on October the 7th. But attacking Rafah, which is a refugee camp right now with 1.5 million people, the vast majority of whom are completely innocent people, many, many, many hundreds of thousands of women and children. This is going to be a catastrophe if Netanyahu goes ahead with attacking Rafah, isn't it?
The catastrophe for the Palestinian people is Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. If Israel does not destroy the last two military battalions who are encamped in Rafah, without whom there cannot be more terror attacks, we'll have peace in the Middle East. It's a catastrophe for the Palestinians, whose food was stolen for 18 years before this war by the leadership, Ismail Haniyeh, who's worth $7 billion. Where was the outrage of Cenk Uygur back then? How is it that these guys are flying around in private jets while the Palestinians were suffering for 18 years with no hope? This is not about caring about the Palestinians. It's about pure anti-Semitism. Let's look at March 14th, 2024, a date that will live in infamy in the annals of the United States Senate, where a Senate majority leader called for regime change of the only democracy in the Middle East. By the way, I want to congratulate Vladimir Putin, a real nail biter yesterday, where he only won by 90% of the vote. Schumer did not call for regime change in Russia. He didn't call for regime change. Bashar al-Assad, Israel's next door neighbor, who killed 600,000 Arabs. He didn't call for regime change in Turkey. My friend Cenk was born in Turkey, where you have the Turkish tyrant Erdogan, who slaughters and imprisons journalists. He didn't call for regime change in Qatar.
So what does that tell you?
What does that tell you?
Okay, but Rabbi Shmuley, what does that tell you about the strength of feeling in America amongst senior politicians about what its great ally Israel is currently doing? Their initial full-scale support.
It tells me that it's a fair question, Piers. And by the way, thank you for having me on again. It tells me that President Biden, who's a good man, but he's 81 years old, has allowed one city in the United States, Dearborn, Michigan. Michigan is the critical swing state, where you have a congresswoman named Rashida Tlaib, who is a dyed-in-the-wool anti-Semite, not anti-Israel, a Jew-hater. He has allowed one city to dictate the presidential election. This is all about presidential politics, and Chuck Schumer allowed himself to be Joe Biden's court Jew. They needed a Jew to get on the Senate floor and say that the people of Israel will no longer be a democracy. To my friend.
All right, let's get to you, Shmuley. There you are in Piers Morgan, leveling very intense criticisms. First thing against Chuck Schumer for being the court Jew. And before we even go on to what's happening here in Israel and should we be fighting Hamas or not, what's going on with one of the leaders of American Jewry? In that sense, what's going on with American Jewry itself? It was a shocking thing that happened there on the Senate floor. Tell me about that.
Let's just start with Cenk for a second, because this is the second time I debated Cenk, and
Right.
the thing about Cenk is that not only is he a real anti-Semite, because if you falsely accuse the Jews of genocide, which he does all the time, and he screams, you got to see some of the other debates, stop killing the Palestinians, and you can see the faces he makes. He's a very unprofessional debater, and his whole strategy is to always accuse someone else of ad hominem attacks while he makes eyebrows and threatens to leave the set, and he's very volatile. He's actually a lot of fun for that reason, but the problem with Cenk is that he's an utter ignoramus when it comes to the Middle East. I mean, his level of ignorance is breathtaking.
I think that's a little bit more fair than calling him an anti-Semite per se.
No, he's definitely an anti-Semite. I'll get back to that in a second. First, let's look at his ignorance. When he starts by saying, and we could pick apart the whole debate and show how ignorant he is, both this debate and the first debate I did with him. First thing he says is, America has never broken with Israel. This is unprecedented. This is really? The Eisenhower administration forced Israel to withdraw from the entire Sinai in 1956. I wonder if he even heard of Eisenhower, because you'll see in this debate later, he didn't know what the Civil War was. Let me repeat that. A presidential candidate for the United States, Cenk Ugyur, seeking the Democratic nomination, did not know what war I was talking about when I mentioned the Civil War. So Eisenhower broke with Israel. He wasn't very good to Israel. Johnson warned Israel in the Six-Day War, if you go it alone, you will be alone. And to Levi Eshkol's credit, he went it alone anyway, and Israel had its greatest military victory ever. George Bush Sr. famously said he's breaking with Israel over loan guarantees when Israel needed so much money to absorb Russian Jews, who would ultimately right now be under the tyranny of Vladimir Putin. I could go on, let alone Obama and the Iran deal, let alone Netanyahu's speech before a joint session of Congress. This is the first time that Israel's broken with the United States. Israel's not a vassal state. It's not the 51st star on the American flag. I love America with all my heart. But the reason I love America is that we love democracy, and Israel's the only democracy. So that's the first thing to Cenk. Total ignoramus. About the anti-Semitism, if he is not an anti-Semite, then it has no meaning, because the number one charge against Jews, for which we have been decimated, slaughtered, defamed, burnt at the stake, and a genocide, is that Jews are murderers, that you kill Christian children, that you drink their
blood libel,
that you kill Jesus. He is one of the foremost blood libelers in the United States. First of all, when he said before 21,000 people have died, he makes up all these numbers. You'll see later in the debate, I actually challenge him. He says that 12,000 children, innocent children, died. He said, and everyone reported it. I said, name one. He couldn't name one. He ultimately came up with the New York Times, whom I reminded, to its credit, always says that their numbers come from the Hamas-run health ministry. If Hamas told me right now that I had a beard, I'd go to the mirror to make sure that it was still there. There is nothing you can say that Hamas, about Hamas, that they would say the truth.
But maybe he's a light type of anti-Semite.
Whatever.
No, I'm saying
it's not for me to do like a gradation.
All I mean to say is that there's so much.
Is he as bad as Khamenei of Iran? Probably not. Is he an anti-Semite? Absolutely.
Shmuley, the point I'm trying to get to is that a lot of people who are fed lies through the media become anti-Semites. They become anti-Israel. There's a spectrum that's being pushed out there.
I have been fed lies about Black people my whole life, that they enact a larger proportion of criminality in the United States, that they're more dangerous. That's pure racism. I always knew it was racism. I've been fed lies about all kinds of people, and I reject it. I've been fed lies. I'm sorry. A guy running for the presidency of the United States should be able to get the truth. So he's an anti-Semite. But now let me go to and I don't say that lightly. He is an anti-Semite. Now let me go to Chuck Schumer. Look.
Wait, let's play that segment. Just 1 second.
Didn't we just play that? I thought we just.
No, let me play Chuck Schumer for just 1 second, because I want you to see.
Yeah.
Here we go.
The demands of extremists like Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the settlers in the West Bank. I have known Prime Minister Netanyahu for a very long time. While we have vehemently disagreed on many occasions, I will always respect his extraordinary bravery for Israel on the battlefield as a younger man. I believe in his heart he has his highest priority is the security of Israel. However, I also believe Prime Minister Netanyahu has lost his way by allowing his political survival to take the precedence over the best interests of Israel. He has put himself in coalition with far-right extremists like Ministers Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and as a result, he has been too willing to tolerate the civilian toll in Gaza, which is pushing support for Israel worldwide to historic lows.
I mean, right, that statement there.
I got to jump in here.
Yeah, that statement was worse than Cenk's. He just said that Netanyahu is willing to tolerate civilian death because of these right-wing ministers.
No, he said more than that. Look, Schumer's speech will, as I said, live in infamy. It will be remembered as one of the most infamous speeches ever delivered, not just by a United States senator on the well of the Senate floor, but actually as by the Senate Majority Leader, who is Jewish, who's using his
very Jewish, right?
Yeah.
Like he's very Jewish.
So let's look at, first of all, look at the contradiction. What he says. On the one hand, he says, "I've known Netanyahu all these years, and I don't believe for one moment that the security of the state of Israel is. I don't question that it's his highest priority." 1 second later, his highest priority is his political survival. You wonder who wrote this speech. His speechwriter should be fired on the spot. I believe that Netanyahu wouldn't do anything to compromise Israeli security except save his own skin, and then he will compromise all Israeli security. So why did Chuck Schumer, who's a decent guy, why did he give the speech? It's simple. You have a man named Joe Biden who deserves a lot of credit for standing behind Israel for the past 5 months and for arming Israel. We Jews believe in gratitude. I show the president tremendous gratitude. So what's changing? Biden is now polling 5 points behind Donald Trump. No one can believe it. Biden is in the fight for his life for the presidency, for re-election. He's 81 years old. On Inauguration Day, he'll be 82. And Americans really just don't want him, not because they think he's done a bad job. Even the Democrats who think he's done a good job, they just think he's too old. By the way, I think it's disgusting when people say he's senile and all this. It's not true. That's garbage. And that's ageism. I hate that. What is true is that Biden is showing that he doesn't, I don't know if he has the physical stamina. He has the mental stamina. I'm not sure he has the physical stamina to do this job. It's an understatement, demanding job. But that's not my opinion. It's the opinion of 70% of Democrats, let alone, the Republicans who don't want him at all.
All right, so he's making a fight for his life. Okay.
Because of that, he's in the fight for his life. Now, there were only 7 states. There used to be 22 states that were swing states. Let's say back in 2000 when President George W. Bush ran against Al Gore. There's now only 7 swing states. And Michigan is critical. You lose Michigan, you've lost the presidency. And Michigan is controlled by an activist city, Dearborn, Michigan, which is filled with our Muslim brothers and sisters, many of whom detest and hate Israel. This is all about criticism from Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Dearborn, Michigan, and Michigan is in play. So I'm guessing what happened is that Biden goes to Schumer and he says, look, I can't give the speech to save my own skin with Muslim voters and Michigan, because that's the only place, there, Paterson, New Jersey, there's a few other places where the Muslim electorate is very significant, right? In the same way that in New York, the Jewish electorate is very significant. I can't give the speech. You have to give it for me. And then, of course, Schumer's dumb enough to give it, and that's why I said he's the court Jew. Schumer will pay a terrible price for that speech. He already is. He's being condemned by Democrats. The only people endorsing him are J Street. It was a horrible, horrible speech. Now, let me tell you, Israel does not have to go to elections right now at all. So he's wrong about that. But I'll tell you who does. The United States has to have an election on the first Tuesday of November. And I hope, based on that alone, I really hope that the Republicans take control of the Senate just so Chuck Schumer is demoted. After giving a speech that was anti-democratic, anti-American values, opposing one of our foremost allies while it fights a genocidal war for its own survival, he deserves to be demoted. I hope he actually gets voted out of the Senate. I hope that a better candidate, he's not up for re-election in 2024. But if the Democrats lose 2 seats, then you're going to see well, it's not going to be. It's not. Gonna be.
There's one thing that you haven't said yet, which is okay. There was an anti-Israel speech. It was an anti-democratic speech, but the real injury was to American Jewry. Like this was from here, the way it looked like is a decline of American Jewry. And also Piers Morgan mentioned another American Jew of the same ilk, which is Thomas Friedman, whom I even toured.
Piers Morgan didn't mention that. What's it called? Cenk Ugyur. Yeah, I love that too. Cenk Ugyur said, and even Thomas.
Oh, right.
So pro-Israel.
Right. Right.
You know, when you do these debates, the rank ignorance, you sometimes have to stop yourself from laughing because you don't want to disrespect your.
But back to my question, which is like there is a degradation of what American Jewry is, and this guy is the leader, one of the leaders of American Jewry, and now he's telling us here in Israel, in the middle of a war, that our prime minister that we elected and his cabinet, which we put into power, is not okay, and that we don't know what we're doing out there. From Washington,
and have an election in the middle of a war. I love that.
Right.
Divert all the focus of your generals, of your lawmakers, of the Knesset, of the prime minister, and don't focus on destroying a genocidal enemy who just murdered the American equivalent of 60,000 people, right? You have to multiply it. But no, go to elections. But Yishai, sadly, when you say that this is like a shock to Israelis of the deterioration of American Jewish lobbying on behalf of Israel, that happened a long time ago. How did Obama pass the Iran nuclear agreement? That happened a long time ago. The strangest thing, actually, now is that Christians are the ones who are the most stalwart supporters. Trump said, I didn't move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem for the Jewish people, the Jewish vote, who didn't vote for me. He only got 30% of the vote. He said, I moved it for the evangelicals, for whom it's even more important. So one of the reasons the Republican Party is so much more pro-Israel today, and let me be careful when I say that, because I am someone who believes in bipartisan support. I do not want to see the Corbynization of American politics the way we saw it in the UK. And I lived in the UK, where a dyed-in-the-wool anti-Semite Jeremy Corbyn takes over the Labour Party, and suddenly, you have to go to the Conservatives. I want to see both parties. And we have Democrats who are staunchly pro-Israel. Sadly, one of them today announced he's not running for re-election. And that's my senator, Robert Menendez, one of the most pro-Israel senators, but he's been charged with corruption. You have Richie Torres, a black gay Democrat whose love of Israel is unflinching. There used to be people like Cory Booker, my dear friend, who was a brother to me, who then abandoned Israel in 2015 with his vote for the Iran nuclear agreement. But before that, he was very pro-Israel. I mean, I could go on. Sadly, we've kind of lost Cory, and that's a tragedy. Much more for himself, because people see that he didn't have any real convictions and that political power and the search for the White House and whatever, and accommodating the extreme left progressive wing of the Democratic Party was more important than his convictions. Because the truth is that Cory does love Israel. He does love the Jewish people. He doesn't have, God forbid, an anti-Semitic bone in his body, but he just showed tremendous moral cowardice. But it's not true that we're losing the Democratic Party. It is true that that even staunch pro-Israel Democrats are showing moral cowardice, and they are bending to the whims of the squad and the progressive left. And if that continues, we run the risk of losing the Democratic Party, God forbid. And here I disagree with my colleagues of the Republican Jewish Coalition, whose many events I've attended. And, it's important to have the RJC. It's important to have the equivalent, Jewish Democrats who lobby for Israel within the Democratic Party. I don't want to see Israel become a one-party issue or with one-party support. I will say that, sadly, it's going in that direction. Now, Biden...
I just wanted to tell you that from this side of the Atlantic, we feel, a lot of us, that Israel's got to have more independence from the United States. It's not somebody, it's an ally for sure, and a powerful ally for sure, and many friends, and also American Jewry. But keeping all of our eggs in one basket is dangerous, strategically dangerous. And suddenly supplies are cut, and who knows what. And therefore, Israel's got to have both a more independence and also more diversity in weapons procurement, etc.
Here's where you and I, this is a tough discussion. I'd love to. You're a very.
You got to remember, I'm here in Israel. We're seeing it from a more kind of Judean type.
You're a very thought-provoking person, and that is a very interesting comment. And it requires a whole other podcast that we'll do together, God willing. Let me tell you my problem with that statement. When you say Israel has to find other options, what are the other options? China?
India.
There aren't. India is not the United States. No,
No, it's not. But we have to
I
diversify.
respectfully-
You agree with me? We
respectfully-
can't be totally reliant. Can you agree with that
Well,
statement?
Israel's an autonomous state, so it should never be totally reliant even on a range of allies, even on a whole plethora of allies. It's an independent sovereign state, first Jewish sovereign state in 2,000 years. Having said that, I believe the United States is the most moral country on earth, like Israel. I think that the two together are the most moral countries. I think the United States is the greatest nation on earth, the world's greatest superpower, and I think it is a nation firmly based on Judeo-Christian values, and it therefore loves Israel and stands united with Israel in terms of its values. I don't want to give up on this partnership. What I want to do is make sure that we American Jews do our part. You rightly say, how did American Jewry allow Schumer to say that? That's a great question. Why didn't we take out massive ads against him the very next day, calling for his resignation? I think, let me say openly right now, Chuck Schumer, God bless you. I know that you're a Jew who feels it in his heart. But if you don't repent of that statement, if you don't repudiate it, go back to the well of the Senate, we'll forgive it. You know, that's what Jews are. But if you don't repent of that, I believe that you should resign. I'm calling on you to resign. Not because you betrayed the Jewish people or the Jewish community. You betrayed the Senate of the United States of America. You are the third or fourth most powerful man in the United States, and you rejected American values. You rejected America's love for democracy. You betrayed an ally, and you betrayed your calling as a senator, let alone your constituents here in the state of New York. So I think he should resign if he doesn't repent of that, and I think that the Senate Democrats should kick him out from the leadership position. What are the chances of that happening right now? Same chances of my becoming the Prime Minister of Canada. But I will tell you that that there is an election coming up in a few months. And if just 2 seats change hand, Chuck Schumer will be demoted automatically. And don't think that he isn't going to pay a price for that speech, because Americans are a moral nation.
Our disappointment was, as I said, it was, to me at least anyway, was a sense of this is where American Jewry is at. And it was just like this moment of like a certain kind of old paternalism. He's telling us what to do. Also, there's another thing which is a kind of line that's being drawn all the time, but it's very subtle, which is Netanyahu has taken these cabinet members and they're not okay, and therefore he's bad.
Yeah.
And there's an erasure of the simple fact that the people of Israel, the majority of Israelis, voted for these parties. We voted for Ben Gvir and Smotrich.
Right. And
I appreciate that you came back. We lost you for a second. I appreciate that. I want to really just talk about one last thing. In parentheses, before we go on, I just want to say that I don't exactly agree with you about the issue of who is Joe Biden. To me, Joe Biden is a guy that has been, for a long time, trying to shrink Israel, trying to weaken Israel, and Obama's presidency that pushed for the Iran deal had him as a vice president. And so,
yeah, look. He not only was he the vice president, he sold the Iran deal. But you have to understand. Let's be fair here. I think we have to really be fair, because the cause of Israel is justice and truth. Biden has been in the Senate for like half a century, and he has been a very pro-Israel senator. I remember meeting him at AIPAC probably in the late 80s, early 90s, several times, and he was always warm, and he's always a pro-Israel.
Whatever. Who cares about that warmness?
No, but one second.
Always talking about his warmness.
Hang on a second. Hang on 1 second. Give me 1 second here.
Sure.
You have to do, you said before about gradations of anti-Semites. That I'm not going to get into, at least for now. But I will do gradations of Israel support. It was Joe Biden, Donald Trump? Absolutely not. But no one was Donald Trump. No one supported Israel the way Trump did. Was Joe Biden even George W. Bush? No, George W. Bush was a more pro-Israel. But was he infinitely better than Obama? Absolutely. Did he feel as vice president that he couldn't make policy on his own? He had to be loyal to the president? Yeah, and maybe he was right. I mean, I can't argue with that. I will say that Biden went to Israel like 5 days after the attack. It was a war zone. It wasn't all that safe for an American president. And he hugged Bibi, and he didn't make, political stuff. And you can't forget stuff like that.
Shmuley, I'm sorry. I love you.
No, Yishai,
I love 95% of what you say, but that was a foil. That was a faux action. That was a bear hug in order to later on shrink Israel. He's an Israel shrinker. He's an Israel shrinker and in the power of our enemies. I don't care if he hugs us at day number 5. It means nothing to me. You are the one that gave the money.
When you say he's an Israel shrinker, you have to accept that there's 2 parties in the United States. The whole Democratic Party is going in the direction of Israel shrinking and a Palestinian state. I'll tell you something. One of the people who has emerged as the strongest pro-Israel candidates for the presidency in the history of this country is Robert Kennedy Jr., who's one of my dearest friends. I actually love Bobby. I don't endorse candidates, so I'm not endorsing him, but as a person, I love him dearly. He spoke at my mother's first yard site a month ago when we did the Torah for Shani Luke. He's a great man. Yesterday, if you saw this incredible interview he did with the AP, he said that most countries, unlike Israel, would have just bombarded Gaza into the Stone Age, but Israel is the most moral country and has not done so. And he also says that the Jews are indigenous.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's exactly moral. Feeding our enemies, I don't think is exactly moral.
Okay,
I
but
think
let me make this.
But we
point.
try
But
to
even-
be moral for
but
sure.
Even,
That's
but,
right.
but even Bobby says, two-state solution. And I've said to him many times, I said, you know what I love about you, Bobby? You always speak the truth. I don't agree with you on like the coronavirus vaccines, but you spoke your truth. You know that a two-state solution is not only immoral because it'll just create another terror state. You also know, and you also know it's impractical. And you know it's impossible. It's never going to happen. The Palestinians are never going to accept it. Israel's never going to do it. It's not, so why are you bringing up this over roasted false chestnut that's never going to happen? You know it's not a solution. So when you speak about those who want to shrink Israel, they're just using platitudes that they know are nonsense. The Palestinians had a Palestinian state. It was called Gaza. Israel withdrew completely and utterly. I was in Gaza City with Al Sharpton in 2001. He went and had lunch with Yasser Arafat. I saw Yasser Arafat face to face. Everyone there, the Jews who came with me, said shake his hand and go and have lunch. And I said I would never do that. He has the blood of my hands on his people. What I did do is that when Sharpton came down for lunch, and there were like 70 news cameras there, and Sharpton did point out that I had brought him to Israel. So I said to Arafat, I wanted to ask him a question in front of the media. You do all this stuff, this talk about peace of the brave, but we know that you're the one who's funding the intifadas. You're paying the checks, so that's rank hypocrisy and murder. And he looked at me and said, because of you, we do not have the peace of the brave, the peace of the brave. And by the way, I mean no offense to Yasser Arafat in saying that he did not look like Robert Redford. He did not look like Tom Cruise. He was not the best looking man I have ever seen. And I had the conscious feeling that I was in the face of true evil, a liar, a killer, a murderer, the father of modern terrorism. But when I went there, he ruled over Gaza. And that was even before Israel's complete withdrawal in 2005. Even then, he had control. Okay, but the point is, we had a Palestinian state. We tried it. It's called Gaza. That happened is that a couple of Hamas leaders became multi-billionaires with investments in Turkey and Europe all over the place. And they're living. The amazing thing about the leaders of Gaza is that they are truly, even, you can't make this stuff up, that as you and I speak, and as their people are at war, and as we're told that the Palestinians are starving, and some of them are because of Hamas. And while this is happening, these guys are in their hot tubs, in their spas, in their penthouses. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, even Hitler, may his name be erased, the most evil human being that ever lived, did not go to like some Swiss chalet for the war. He went to his Wolf's Lair, and he was in the Berlin bunker. What the leaders of Hamas would, I've never seen anyone allow this. Like, why didn't Hamas immediately say, you guys have to come back and lead the war? Because they will never. They are just there to have the Palestinians die as a PR exercise against Israel and to steal all of their money, which is what they've done.
Again, I want to say to you that to me, President Biden is a man who has empowered Iran over and over again, which is the machine, which is the power behind the October 7th attacks.
That is true.
And that means that he's a friend of my enemy, and therefore he is an enemy in that sense.
You can't. But that's still look.
The point is that big hug meeting was not something that touched me. I'm like, this is a play. This is a play.
Yishai, let me tell you something. The strange thing about Israel and American presidents is that sometimes the people that we consider the worst presidents, and I by no means at all consider Joe Biden one of the worst presidents towards Israel. I do not believe that. But the ones who were true anti-Semites, Nixon. We know that Nixon was so anti-Semitic that he couldn't control. He knew he was being taped in the Oval Office, and half of the recordings is how much he hates Jews and how much Jews love money and how I mean, even Billy Graham was caught on tape speaking about demonic Jews in the Oval Office.
But Nixon was willing to help us.
But in 1973,
Right.
after October 6th, when there was a Jewish Secretary of State who was a refugee from Hitler, but wanted Israel to have a bloody nose in the hope that if Israel lost a little bit of the war, even ultimately winning, they would be more open to peace negotiations. While the Jewish Secretary of State delayed the airlift of arms to Israel, it was that anti-Semitic president that called up Kissinger and said, "Where the hell are the arms? Do it now." Ordered the Jewish secretary. Then let's look at Harry Truman. Truman goes and he writes this in his, he had a private diary. It was only published like 20 years ago. And he writes in the diary that no one is as wicked and as cruel and as selfish as the Jews. And then if I'm not mistaken, please look us up afterward. I think he even said that even the Nazis have nothing on them for cruelty. I think he wrote that. So was he an anti-Semite? Sure sounds like it. We know his wife was an anti-Semite. We know that his mother-in-law, but he called himself Cyrus. Without his vote, there might not have been a state of Israel. So the point is this. I don't look at what Truman writes in his, when all that stuff came out, I defended Truman. I said, a man has a right to be an anti-Semite in his heart. And I don't care what Nixon said in his private White House conversations either. I don't care about latent anti-Semitism. I actually think it's one of the biggest mistakes of American Jewry that they always say, let's make sure that anti-Semitism doesn't go underground. Let's make sure, better to expose it. What kind of crap is that? I don't care about underground anti-Semitism that never harms me. Do I care if a guy hates my guts, but he never harms me, never says it, buries it? What do I care?
Okay.
I care about all the Muslims in the United States. I should never say that because Muslims are my brothers. The Islamists. Let's not tar and feather Muslims, all the God-fearing Muslims. The Islamists who are fake Muslims, Islamism is a political ideology with a thin veneer of Islam covering, just like Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, which has nothing to do with Islam. I care about the Islamists who want to kill me in Times Square and told me that I should kill myself. I care about the Islamists who've attacked me, taking my grandkids ice skating 3 times. I care about Muhammad Hijab, who openly put pictures of my IDF sons, God forbid, Chas v'shalom, God forbid, Chalila v'chas, in body bags. I care about overt anti-Semitism. So if any of you who are watching me who hate my guts and you hate me for being Jewish, and you hate my Jewish nose, my Jewish beard, my Jewish yarmulke, my Jewish name, as long as you never tell me, and as long as you're not one of the 1,000 people every day on my social media feeds who tells me how much they want me to die and how Jews are all killers, I don't care. It's in your heart. Keep it there. Keep it in your rancid, poisonous heart.
But
as long as you never show it, I don't care.
What if that anti-Semite that never shows it sends a ton of money to assassins, murderers, people developing a nuclear bomb, people who pay terrorists every single day, right? To the PA, to Iran. What if you just send money, but you give a big, beautiful, car salesman smile? Hi, I love you. And here's the money to the murderers right behind your back.
Then they are showing it. No. Then they are showing it.
No, they're not showing it. They're just doing it.
No, I'm talking about people who don't do. Look, what I'm saying is Truman wrote in his diary that Jews are more cruel than the Nazis. Did that hurt any Jew? No. Does he have a right to write it?
I was giving you an example about President Biden who supports our enemies.
Sorry. Yeah. Let me be clear. Biden
sends the money to the killers.
Biden's policies about Iran have been atrocious. Not as bad as Biden, as Obama, because you can't get worse than Obama's Iran deal. But he was second worst when it comes to Iran.
That's pretty bad.
No, actually third worst, because the worst, of course, is someone who was an anti-Semitic president, and that was Jimmy Carter, a disgusting. It's hard. I don't like saying this because I saw him. He just lost his wife, and my heart goes out to him. And he looks so frail. So you know what? Let me not speak that way about him.
Forget it. I can speak it. I don't care about his frailty or his passed away wife. I could not care less. The guy hates Israel. He shrank Israel by 70%. He's endangered us.
He's the one that lost Iran. I mean, he's the one that allowed the He didn't support the Shah, and he allowed Khomeini to come to power. Right. And he's the one that allowed America to be held hostage for an entire year, which is why Hamas ultimately took the Israeli hostage. Carter is the father of sadly of modern hostage taking, which keeps democracies their hands tied so they can't fight back. And let me just say, all of our
You got a phone call?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Everything's good. Go ahead.
Is that like your wife calling saying, Yishai, come for breakfast? Like, what
No,
the
no,
hell?
no. Shmuley,
Carter
I'll
is,
tell you. Shmuley, I'll tell you what.
Listen. No, no. I want to say one final thing.
But I do want to switch gears, so let me know when we can switch
Wait. No, I have
gears.
to say one final thing. We've been on. It's 51. It's almost 2 a.m. There's one thing we both have to say. Both of us. Yishai, we did not talk enough about the hostages.
Right.
The hostages they have to be released. That has to be.
No, they don't have to be released. We have to destroy the people that are holding them. They're not going to be released. We got to crush those bad guys. We got to starve them out. We got to smoke them out. We got to defeat them. It's not going to happen because Mashiach is going to come. We got to take care of business.
While we do that, we still have to demand a release. And why hasn't, why
if we demand their release, that means there's a Hamas to release them. I don't want to demand the release. I want no Hamas at the end of this.
No, release them and then destroy Hamas, but have them released. They have to be released. The hostages have to be released right now. We have to
get them. We have to.
Every second that they stay there, Jewish women are being raped, are being brutalized, and who knows what else? We know they're being raped. We don't even know that little baby. Is anyone feeding him? Is he still alive? They have to be released, and we have to destroy Hamas. And Israel cannot leave Gaza. That's something that has to be, how many years, etc. But